So, Aaron, why do you think that most insurance companies don't cover Turo?
Yeah, so if you think about it, I mean, Turo's a very new thing and it is just now gaining popularity. So all of these insurance companies, when you're like, hey, I want to rent out my car to other people, they have no idea what you're even talking about, because this is brand new. Most of the reps that I talk to from different insurance companies, they don't even know what Turo is, right? So
Have you talked to the popular insurance companies like, let's say, State Farm, Progressive, Allstate? Do those cover Turo or do they not?
I've talked to all of them, yes, and no, most of them do not cover Turo cars. And by cover Turo cars, I think that's important for us to understand what that means, right? So Turo requires you to have your own personal insurance when you're renting out cars. So aside from the Turo protection that they provide, you do still need to have an insurance plan on that vehicle, just in case something happens in between trips. Like if it's sitting in the parking lot, gets sideswiped, they don't want you to get absolutely screwed. So Turo makes sure and they enforce that you do have insurance on your vehicle, right? Now, when you're reaching out to all of these different insurance companies and you're saying, hey, can you insure my Turo vehicle? They're going to be like, I don't know what that even means. I just don't want anything to do with it. And I think a lot of them assume that they're going to be covering the vehicle while it's on the trip. And they're just like, no, I don't want to do that. The case actually is they're only covering the car in between trips. So in my eyes, I think it's a good move for insurance companies to cover the Turo cars because you're really only worried about the car in between trips.
But they also don't want people lying about stuff. Like, let's say something happened on a Turo trip and there was damage, and then they're like, oh no, I was driving it. Could I, get the insurance money? So I see how they see the risk. Obviously, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Do you have personally just liability insurance on your Turo cars, or do you also have the full coverage? Like, what is your opinion on that? Because I know just liability is usually cheaper.
Yeah, okay, so here's how I kind of handle this. If it's a car that I personally want to use in addition to renting it out on Turo, then I'm going to have Liberty Mutual insurance, okay? So the reason for that is Liberty Mutual will provide like your normal full coverage insurance on the vehicle, and it's very good coverage when I'm personally driving the car. Now, if the car is strictly a Turo car and only is going to be used as a rental car, then what I like to use is something called Lula. Now, Lula is an insurance company that is fairly new, and they love working with Turo cars for some reason. It's their business model essentially, is they cover rental fleets, and it's a flat rate, like $99 a month when you have as many cars as we do, and the deductible is a $1,000 deductible. So we get coverage of $2,500 or $25,000 of liability. So no matter what state you're in, Lula's going to give you the state minimum for liability coverage. There's something called the Graves Amendment, which essentially states that, for example, we have somebody renting a car and that person, our guest, hits somebody and God forbid they kill the person, right? So somebody's walking across the sidewalk, my guest is driving the car, hits a person, kills the person, and then they want to sue. So previously, I think this came into effect in like 2005. I could be wrong about that. But previously, the family of that individual who got injured would sue not only the driver, but the rental company for millions, right? Because they're saying, hey, they were driving your car that you rented out to our guests, so you are partially responsible for the death of my family member, And so
that makes sense, but
it's crazy. Yeah, it's insane. And so I think it was Budget Rental Car. They got rinsed for millions. This was before the Graves Amendment came into effect. And now there's been an amendment passed that says if you're the rental company renting out your car to an individual and that individual like hurts somebody, that individual injures somebody, then they can only, the family that had the injured person or the individual themselves can only sue the rental company for the state minimum. And so when we're renting through Lula covers the state minimum in every single state. So that's the maximum amount that a guest can actually get out of us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that for sure makes sense. And does Lula Insurance cover the guests when they're on a Turo trip?
Yeah. So that's a beauty about Lula. And a lot of companies don't want to do this, but Lula will actually insure the car while the guest is renting it. Versus a lot of companies like Liberty Mutual, Root, Travelers, all these different companies that will still insure the car and allow you to actually even have insurance at all. They won't insure the car while it's being rented out to a guest, but Lula does provide insurance while it's rented out to a guest. So if a guest gets into an accident, then we can run it through the Lula insurance rather than the Turo protection.
And what are the advantages of going through Lula instead of Turo?
Okay, so the Turo protection is pretty bad in my opinion. And I'll share my screen so I can show you exactly why. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do like a quick example of damage on a vehicle. So let's assume your window gets broken while a guest has the car rented out. Now, a typical plan for a Turo host to choose is the 90 plan. The 90 plan will reflect a $2,500 deductible for the host. Now, the guests, they a lot of the times are going to get like the minimum protection plan, or they're going to get even higher than minimum, right? So minimum protection is going to be $3,000. Max protection would be a $0 deductible. A lot of people don't realize that these are completely disassociated with each other. The guest deductible and the host deductible are not related at all. So when you have $500 of damage, say the window cracks during a guest trip, it's a $500 repair, and the guest has a $3,000 deductible, and the host has a $2,500 deductible. What Turo does is they say, all right, guest, your deductible was $3,000. You're going to have to pay us the $500 towards the windshield out of pocket. And oh yeah, we also are going to charge you fees on top of that for even going through our team. And then they're going to come over to the host and say, okay, host, your car got damaged. It was a $500 piece of damage. The damage price was under your deductible, so you're responsible for the full cost. Now the host has to pay $500 towards the damage as well. $500 of damage. The guest and the host are both paying that cost plus a few fees, and Turo is collecting $1,150 at a minimum. And this fee can go up. Yeah.
What? So they're literally getting like a massive amount of profit off of a $500 claim. So
yeah,
there's no point of going through Turo if you have a higher deductible plan.
Exactly. So what you should be doing, and you should be enforcing this with every single guest, every single time you get damage, what you should be doing is going straight to the guest and saying, hey, the damage is $500. Your deductible is $3,000. If we go through the Turo protection, then you're going to end up having to pay $150 more at a minimum. This can go up to like $500 in fees, just depending on a few factors. And so if you said, pay me out of pocket because it's less than your deductible, that $500, then you as a host don't have to pay any of this. Mm-hmm. You're only paying this if you go through the Turo deductibles. And so we want to avoid that at all costs, right? Because it is absolutely ridiculous. Now let's imagine the only scenario that I would ever go through the Turo protection is, first of all, if the guest deductible is $0, right? So if the guest picked the max protection plan, now they're going to be only responsible for $0 of damage. So typically what we're going to do is just not even deal with the guest at all, because at the end of the day, this is just going to be a headache having to deal with the Turo protection. What I'm going to do here is just pay out of pocket. Mm-hmm. And so I don't like renting to guests that have a $0 deductible, because what that tells me is if the guest has a $0 deductible, then I am taking on literally all of the risk for that trip. And so if anything happens, say the guest drives the car into a wall and there is $2,000 of damage, the guest is paying $0, I'm paying $2,000 out of pocket. If I go through the protection plan, then okay, sure, the guest pays a couple of fees, but at the end of the day, Turo is collecting all the money out of my pocket, not the guest.
Wow. Turo protection's a scam, bro. That is insane.
It's horrible. It's terrible. This alone is the reason that Lula is incredibly important to our business operations and just the management in general. Instead of having to go through this, if the guest deductible is above $1,000, and instead of saying, hey, let's put $1,000 towards your Turo protection, then we can say, hey, let's put $1,000 towards the Lula deductible, and now we can just have the cost completely covered by Lula instead of us having to pay our deductible as a host. Mm-hmm. And so I still, even going through Lula, I don't want to rent to people that have a $0 deductible.
What do you do in those instances?
I personally, I don't know if this should even go out there, but I don't even rent to them.
Like, what do you do?
On CarSync, there is a variable where you can say, if the guest has a maximum protection plan, then send out this message, right? In my case, I'll usually be sending out like a welcome message, like, hey, thank you so much for renting a car. Here's a little bit of information about your trip. But instead, with these guests that have either a $0 deductible or there's some that have $500 deductibles, I'm sending them out an automated message that says, hey, I'm so sorry, but the car is not available for the dates that you chose. case, I would highly recommend that you cancel your trip with me and book with another guest. And then I explain how it's actually not going to hurt them financially because they get a maximum refund if it is more than 24 hours away from the date of their trip. Sending out an automated message to cancel all of these trips.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate the help.